Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consumer Warrior Podcast, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you with your big debt problems. If you're just dabbling in debt, this isn't the podcast for you. We deal with the big problems here, like repossession, debt collection lawsuits, foreclosure, bankruptcy, and all those other horrible things that are out there. We help you to help yourself. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, John Skiba, and again, I'm a consumer protection attorney in the state of Arizona. And on today's episode, I wanted to talk about debt settlement companies and how that process works, and maybe what some of my recommendations are as to debt settlement companies. You know, I meet with a lot of people here in my law practice, and they don't want to file bankruptcy. I always say, nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, so they're looking for other opportunities to resolve their debts. And so they'll ask for recommendations from me. Who is it that I would recommend? There's a lot of different companies out there on the internet that say that they can help you to settle your debts. And I typically don't recommend any of them. And I'm going to tell you why I don't recommend any of them is because I don't see them being that helpful. And part of understanding that reason as far as why I don't recommend them, let me tell you how they typically work. This is how the typical debt settlement company works, is they review your debts and they come up with a plan as far as how much they think it's going to take to be able to settle your specific accounts. And so they set you up on a payment plan where you're sending in a dollar amount each and every month to the debt settlement company, and then they're setting it aside in a dedicated account where they try to accumulate a balance that they think they can then reach out and settle your debts with. And the reason why they do this is because creditors are much more likely to settle a debt if you're coming at them with a lump sum rather than if you're saying, hey, I want to pay $50 a month or $25 a month on this particular account. They're not likely to do that. So what they want to do is essentially put aside and act as a savings account for you. And then once they feel they have enough to reach out and settle the debt, they'll reach out to your creditors and offer the amount and try to get a deal in place. Now, in theory, that works. The reality is, and one of the big problems with this is that even though they are setting aside the money and you're making the payment each month and you feel like, hey, I'm putting all my best efforts into trying to get this settled, your creditors are really not in the loop generally in this process. What they're doing, they may get contacted by the debt settlement company and they may tell them, hey, we're putting money aside to try to settle these at some future date. But in the meantime, they're still reporting you delinquent to the credit reporting agencies, so it's hurting your credit score. And further, it doesn't stop collections. You're likely still going to get phone calls. And what happens more times than I can tell you, people come into me needing to file for bankruptcy because they've been sued by one of their creditors. Or worse, they've already been sued and they're getting their wages garnished. And they often say to me, I don't understand how this could possibly have happened. I have this debt settlement company out there working for me, trying to get these things settled, and then these guys just dropped a lawsuit in my lap. Well, the reason is because they don't have to honor that settlement agreement. They don't have to really do anything but continue on with their normal collections while the debt settlement company is setting that money aside. So that's why I don't recommend any of the companies, is because I haven't seen them work. And in fact, what I've seen happen is people delay, hurt their credit even worse, and end up filing for bankruptcy anyway. So that begs the question then, what do I recommend? Really, there's two options for dealing with your debt. One of them is to try to settle the debts yourself. Now, this requires you to be disciplined. That's the one advantage that the debt settlement company has, is essentially they force you to be disciplined and set aside that money because you're sending it to them and they're putting it in an account. That's hard to do, especially when things are tight. You set aside some money, kind of build up those reserves. Something happens, the car breaks, medical bills, whatever it is, and you end up, going in and taking those funds to cover your general living expenses. But there are different things. I've always talked about, I've been a big proponent of Dave Ramsey's program. If you haven't read his book's called The Total Money Makeover. I would highly recommend it. One of the better books out there, not only on getting out of debt, but just general finances in helping you to really be more stable financially. I've actually attended his class, Financial Peace University, which you can actually attend online now. Both of those resources are excellent. I'll put a link in the show notes to those. Highly recommend his method and process for getting out of debt. A lot of good, sound advice in there. That's one way that I think you can invest in yourself yourself to get this done, and it's much cheaper than the fees that the debt settlement company or even an attorney is going to charge you is for the cost of a $25 book, or even the Financial Peace University. I believe it's $100 or something like that, or maybe a couple $100. That's money that's well spent, I think. Like I said, I've read the book, I've been through the course. I would recommend those programs highly. If your debt problems are more serious, then I think you need to start looking at a possible bankruptcy. And before you make that decision, as far as whether bankruptcy or no bankruptcy, it's important to meet with a bankruptcy attorney and go over your situation. There are a lot of things on the internet, including things at my website, and things are different from state to state. It's a federal law, but there's different exemptions that protect your belongings. There's different approaches to bankruptcy. So I would recommend you set up an appointment, consultation with a bankruptcy attorney, and talk to them about what your situation is and let them tell you if it's a good option. Because sometimes, and I tell you actually quite a bit, people come into my office and the case seems at the outset very simple, and then all of a sudden they'll tell me something where there's this little wrinkle that kind of makes things actually very complicated and can cause you a lot of pain, that if you're kind of going in this on your own or without getting fully informed, you can cause yourself a lot of problems. So like I said, I don't generally recommend any of the debt settlement companies. I think you can do all of this on your own, or if things are really drastic and serious, then I think you're looking at a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. If you want to learn more about this from my viewpoint, you can go to my YouTube channel, Consumer Warrior Project. You can also go to my website at consumerwarrior.com. I also have a lot of self-help courses. I put together an online tutorial that talks specifically about bankruptcy and debt settlement, and you can go through those at your own pace. They're much more informed and detailed than like my YouTube videos. These are actual courses that you go through that'll educate you on this process. I also have a lot of free forms and templates that you can download. You can get those over at my website at legal.coach. That's the actual website address, legal.coach. Go over there and you can access all of that information to better educate yourself before you make these very important financial decisions. So that's going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you watching today, and I'll catch you next time.